Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about how Nintendo themselves is actually the best leaker of them all. So, on this channel, I do talk about a lot of rumor and leaks that come from places that have a track record showing credibility or a history of correctness. It's not to say that 100% what they are saying is going to come true. That's why they are rumors. That's why they're only possibly being leaked, not necessarily actually for sure. There's so much potential flux when it comes to talking about things that have not been announced yet. But what I thought would be very interesting would be to talk about how Nintendo themselves has actually leaked or strongly hinted or teased at various projects over the years. And when you take a look at how things have happened, it's evident that there is a lot that's going on behind the scenes, a lot of flux. Things take longer than you might think, but they do very often happen or are based in something. And so if it's like this for Nintendo themselves, then imagine those who aren't Nintendo. So like we have this situation going on with Star Fox, for example. Star Fox, supposedly, according to various outlets, Nate the Hate, VGC, other journalists, Nash Weedle, so many have reported on this potential Star Fox game launching in this upcoming month of June with a supposed reveal in this month of April. And now we're getting pretty late into the month of April. There's only a few days left, so understandably, people are growing concerned. People are growing skeptical. But we just got an update from Nate the Hate on this subject. So yesterday at 4:13 p.m. on Reset Era, Nate said this: "I have zero doubt in the Star Fox project. Hell, VGC and a French journalist have also spoken about the game and backed the info of it coming in June. If it doesn't get revealed this month as planned, it simply means Nintendo made a marketing pivot and adjusted the timeline a touch. I enjoy seeing the revisionist history around Splatoon Raiders, when you had people doubting it would even release this year, just days before I dropped this episode." And so if you're confused about the Splatoon Raiders thing, Nate the Hate had a podcast where he talked about Nintendo's summer lineup, which would include Star Fox, but also Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and Splatoon Raiders, and more. And we didn't even have a release year for Splatoon Raiders, so there was no certainty or confidence on when Splatoon Raiders was coming out. But sure enough, shortly after this podcast came out, we got ratings for both Splatoon Raiders and Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, and now Nintendo has officially confirmed that Splatoon Raiders is their second game coming out in the month of July. And you see, what's interesting about this is that Nintendo, in a way, is kind of supporting the idea that something big and surprising is coming in June, because they positioned another title for July, and June is completely vacant. So we still don't know what's happening in June, and Nate is actually very confident that Star Fox is happening. And when you take a look at the history of June releases by Nintendo, you look at the last 10 years, as we talked about yesterday, they've never skipped June. There have always been published titles coming out in June. To think that this would now be the exception, especially when we have this very strange vacancy and Nintendo's been so consistent with their releases once or twice a month since the Switch 2 has come out, not every single month, but most of them, it seems unlikely that there would be nothing in June. Most likely there's going to be something, and we have several outlets corroborating this story of Star Fox being the June title. But let's now take a closer look at what things Nintendo has leaked or teased over the years. And I think when we take a look at a lot of it, it offers a lot of perspective on what's going on behind the scenes, the potential flux there could be. And this is looking at when Nintendo themselves has leaked things, so it might help you to better understand the challenges for those reporting on things that are outside of Nintendo before they've actually been announced. But before going forward, if you do find yourself enjoying my videos, I would very much appreciate your support, subscribing if you haven't already. So someone at Nintendo that I've joked around quite a bit as being one of the best leakers there are is Aonuma, the Zelda series producer. And why do I joke around about this? Well, it's because there's actually a lot of truth to it. Here are some examples. Aonuma, at a Zelda concert, teased Skyward Sword. He came out on stage and said to the audience, "We know what you're thinking. Skyward Sword on Switch, right?" And everyone freaked out, but shortly afterwards, Nintendo executives had to deny that Skyward Sword was coming to Switch. But Skyward Sword did come to Switch a few years later. Or you have the time that Aonuma teased Link's Awakening Remake, talking about wanting to live as a thief, and then a few years later he confirmed that he indeed was referencing a remake for The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Or more recently, you have this interview where Aonuma was talking about the potential of a playable Zelda. Yeah, it is interesting when you think about the name of the series, The Legend of Zelda, but Link is always the main character. And Link has been the main character, and Zelda has always been involved, and they have a relationship and their own rules in each of the games. But it is true that I think there's always room for thinking about this type of thing and Zelda's role, and there may be some sort of possibility for something like that in the future. And then right after saying that, Aonuma had to interject in English because his last part was translated, and said maybe, considering his history of teasing prior Zelda projects and how Nintendo executives have had to shut down things that he teased when they weren't ready for them to be teased. It's quite interesting. Oh, and also, by the way, a few months later, Nintendo announced Echoes of Wisdom, the first Legend of Zelda game where Princess Zelda was the playable main character. And so in regards to Zelda, Aonuma has quite a bit of history of teasing future Zelda projects, or perhaps leaking future Zelda projects, and we now think about this widely reported remake for Ocarina of Time. We've been talking about this for years, for various reasons. There are 3 different interviews that we've talked about on the channel where Aonuma was probably hinting at Ocarina of Time. One where he didn't shut down the idea of a modern remake, another where he was wondering if people would understand who Rauru from Ocarina of Time would even be nowadays, and then a very recent one suggesting we, as in Nintendo, internal Nintendo, would have a Zelda project out soon and wanted to beat Koei Tecmo to the punch where they put Age of Imprisonment on Switch 2 first, and that maybe there's some inspiration from that game in this next Zelda release. But then going beyond the Aonuma interviews, we have things like the patents, and there have been patents in the past that have certainly hinted at things, but in regards to Ocarina of Time, we've seen the fairy patent. It looks very much like Navi being used in a temple like the Temple of Time, where you have portraits of the Poe sisters. And then there are the various LEGO sets. You have the LEGO set of the Deku Tree that not only had the Breath of the Wild version, but they decided to go all the way back to the Ocarina of Time Deku Tree as well as an alternative option as part of the same set. And then more recently, they put out the dedicated Ocarina of Time LEGO set about Link vs. Ganondorf at the very end. And so there have been things teasing Ocarina of Time for some time. We'll see if this remake is actually going to happen. It hasn't been officially confirmed yet, but we're in this situation where it's basically all but confirmed at this point. Our confidence in the reality of this project has never been higher, and the only way we could be more confident in this project than now is if Nintendo were to actually officially confirm it themselves. Realistically speaking, which I expect will happen this June. We'll see. But it's not just about Zelda and Aonuma teasing or leaking things, but other parts of Nintendo. Take Shigeru Miyamoto, for example. Miyamoto, shortly after the release of the Mario movie back in 2023, took part in a Variety interview. And at the end of the interview, he said this. He was asked about the next mainline Mario game. Miyamoto began chuckling, and he said, "All I can say is please stay tuned for future Nintendo Directs." So he didn't give a straight answer. But what happened in the very next Nintendo Direct? Nintendo announced the first brand new 2D Mario in many years, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Coincidence? I absolutely think not. Miyamoto was teasing something here. But on the note of the movie, when they were first promoting this movie, one of the first things they showed off was the new design for Donkey Kong. Miyamoto showed us this new design. And this is the modern look of Donkey Kong now. Of course, this is a depiction of him in the movie, but we now know this is simply the new look for Donkey Kong. We've seen him in various games that have come out on Switch 2 with a new look, including Donkey Kong Bonanza, the big brand new game. Donkey Kong's involvement with the movie, with the Donkey Kong Park expansion, these were all signs that something bigger was happening for Donkey Kong, including the redesign. These are all very strong hints that something major was happening to Donkey Kong, and as it turned out, as was predicted, as was rumored, a 3D Donkey Kong being made by the Mario Odyssey team, or at least part of them, put out Donkey Kong Bonanza. Now Donkey Kong is back and really strong as a series. But you see, Nintendo's cross-promotional strategies go beyond Donkey Kong. We've talked about in the past how the Mario movie led to a significant boost in sales for Mario games across the board. This is well documented. And I do think Nintendo has been pushing Pikmin as well. We've talked about that before as well. But what I'm going to bring up here is Star Fox, considering his relevance with what's been going on. A few weeks ago, from a Mario Galaxy movie commercial, an ad that was put out, there was a frame, or a couple frames, that people noticed. This is it right here. A lot of people are trying to argue that this other character in this scene that's clearly about showing important main characters for a pivotal moment in the movie, some people thought it might be like a bike or a backpack. Those never made sense. What made sense is this would be a character, and the shape of the character, the coat, the sleeves, the bracelet, the blaster, the boots, Fox McCloud from Star Fox, and people didn't want to believe it. And at the time I thought it was crazy, but it's what made sense with what we're literally looking at here. And sure enough, what was confirmed a few weeks later, Fox McCloud from Star Fox in the Super Mario Galaxy movie, in a very big way, taking on a role similar to Donkey Kong's role in the prior Mario movie. And now we have all these different outlets reporting that a Star Fox game is coming out really soon. It's possible that the reports are wrong about the Star Fox thing happening this June, although based how things have been going on, I'm still pretty confident something is happening with this. But if it somehow isn't, I don't think that means there isn't a Star Fox game coming. I think what it means is that there is still a Star Fox game coming. Nintendo would not go through these efforts of this cross-promotion here if there was not a bigger plan. And I believe the bigger plan is, yeah, a new Star Fox title. They're going to bring it back in a similar fashion to the way they brought back Donkey Kong. But let me point out something about another series Nintendo has cross-promoted. Pikmin. Pikmin 4 has done really well. We saw the Pikmin 1 and 2 releases. We saw Pikmin 3 Deluxe. We saw Pikmin in the Universal Park. There have been the Pikmin shorts and films and all those different things. Nintendo has been pushing Pikmin in various ways. Pikmin were also in the Mario Galaxy movie, for example. But before this big revival or big push of the Pikmin series, we go back to 2015. Shigeru Miyamoto told us that Pikmin 4 is very close to completion in 2015. The game did not come out until 2023, 8 years later. And I think it just helps to put things into perspective here. When Shigeru Miyamoto, the father of so many important Nintendo franchises, including Pikmin, says something is close and then it ends up not being close, that just goes to show that when we're talking about things before they're officially announced, there is a lot of possibility for change, for flux. And we have actually got an explanation about what happened. So here, the chief programming director Yuji Kondo on Pikmin 4 said this in regards to why things took so long. After the development for Pikmin 3 ended, we started development for Pikmin 4 as a small team. As we made several attempts and tried out various things, there were moments when we could see the game take shape. But since we had to prioritize other projects, we weren't able to create the development team framework needed to complete the game. But for the fruits of our labor during that time led to the result of what Pikmin 4 is today. And I think about this, and I think this provides a lot of really interesting perspective. First off, you go back to 2015, this was the Wii U era. Nintendo had no real reason to invest a lot of resources into a game for a dying console. Waiting for the Switch made a lot of sense. But also, if Miyamoto was saying the game was very near completion, but they only had a small team, and they hadn't put together a big team to put everything together yet, that seems a bit off, but perhaps it's some insight as to how these things work. A lot of the foundational work is the concepting and coming up with the ideas, and once the ideas are in place, then they can put together a larger team to piece it all together, and perhaps that process may not take as long as some think. At least maybe that's a perspective from Miyamoto's side of things here, where he thought they were very close to having the core concept for Pikmin 4, and that's why he said what he said, thinking it might not take more than another couple of years, which might fit in line with what he said in the past, but that isn't what happened. I mean, we think about the situations regarding Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza. We heard about a Donkey Kong project that we now know to be Donkey Kong Bonanza really early on to the Switch 1 era, but it didn't come out until the Switch 2 came out. Sometimes these projects take a really long time, And that does not mean that they're working on the project in earnest, all hands on deck the entire time. No, there's a back and forth. People are working on different things at different times depending on what's going on. So I think this is really important information to keep in mind as we investigate and try to figure out what Nintendo is actually planning for the future. Something we do a lot of here on this channel. It's not just Aonuma and Miyamoto that have been up to funny business in the past. Even Tanabe, who we now know is retiring, Kensuke Tanabe, who's responsible for producing the Paper Mario games and the Metroid Prime games. Also back in 2015, Tanabe said this: "So it was Silex, another hunter for Metroid Prime hunters at the end of Metroid Prime 3. Personally, I'd like to create a story centering around Silex and Samus," he said. "We've done a story based on the hunters, and this time around we're doing a story on the Galactic Federation." He added, referring to his new 3DS game, "I would like to cross the two over in the future, and of course see a little more of Samus." And now we have Metroid Prime 4. It has finally come out, and Silex is a very important character to the game, as are the Federation. They're all tied in. Tanabe was hinting at some very core story pieces to Prime 4 10 years in advance. Which brings me to something we recently heard from Tanabe about Prime 5. I figured that this new Prime title would probably be my last chance to make that game a reality. So I conceived this game as the first chapter in the Silex saga. I wrote Silex to be an unscrupulous, vindictive, and almost demonic kind of character, and from this game onwards, Samus will also be aware of him as an enemy that she cannot avoid facing and must defeat. From this game onwards, that's another interesting hint there. Consequently, the score between Silex and Samus has yet to be settled. Within these lines here, there's 3 different times where he suggested that Silex will be involved in the future. However, this game took longer to finish than expected, yeah, and it's been decided that I will not be involved in the production of the series moving forward. Therefore, while there are no plans for a sequel, I hope that Miss Tabata and Retro Studios can one day bring this story to a close. So here, Tanabe is not confirming a future game. Reminder, we think about how Aonuma has done some things like talk about Skyward Sword or Link's Awakening when he maybe shouldn't, and Nintendo doesn't seem happy about that. I think this is something else to keep in mind here, but clearly, Tanabe has indicated to us that Silex will be a pivotal piece to the future of the Metroid Prime series whenever that does happen. And yes, there are rumors that Metroid Prime 5 is in the works. We'll see what actually happens. I believe they put a foundation together here for a reason. I think if you play through Metroid Prime 4, it's fairly obvious that there is more to the story here. But this wouldn't be the first time Nintendo has maybe done something to indicate the future about the Metroid series. Remember that fan project AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake? Well, Nintendo of America issued takedowns for the game, or takedown requests, and that ended the project, but that happened in September 2016, and then a year later, what came out? Metroid Samus Returns, an actual new official remake of Metroid 2. It makes you wonder, if there wasn't a 2D Metroid in the works, would they have issued that takedown request for AM2R? Nintendo in general is not a fan of fan projects like this, but they're not always so consistently quick to take these things down. It may indeed have had something to do with a remake being in the works. And then another fun one I'll put out there, this is for Splatoon 3. We go back to the beginning of 2020, the Splatoon team put out this image where they said, "Have a great 2020." But if you look at the water, there's an SOS that's being reflected from the numbers. And if you look, there's actually text that are being written by the waves. Save our salmons. And we thought this might be a teaser for Splatoon 3, and a couple years later, Splatoon 3 came out. And yes, the salmonids were involved. And so clearly, there is a significant history, and I'm sure there is a lot more I did not cover. And so if you have any other ones, I would gladly love to see it in the comments below. Please share with me other times Nintendo has teased or leaked things about future projects, because I think it's interesting to look at, and it can help us give us a better understanding of how Nintendo operates, and perhaps helps us to figure out what else they're working on for the future. And as many are hoping, perhaps that also includes the widely reported Star Fox for Switch 2 and this big, ambitious Ocarina of Time remake. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.